Okay, as Mike said, a very brief welcome here to everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. It seems like the steps we're taking, the measures we began taking early on, stopping face-to-face meetings was the right thing to do. Everyone seems to be in good health. I have heard no reports of anyone who has gotten any illness or anything. So thanks to all of you for helping us with a situation that most of us would probably never have imagined we would actually really be living through. This is the stuff that movies or scenarios for drills come up with. And here we are actually going through it. So thanks to everyone for checking in this evening for our first run at a major gathering. And everyone stay well. We'll all be back together again soon. And with that, Mike, back to you and get on with our evening's activities here.
Okay, very good. And a special welcome to the Metro members that are here this evening. And we wanted to kind of open it up, and we had up to 100 participants tonight. So Jim was very open to that. In fact, he was very pleased when we started talking about it. So with that, let me tell you, and now I am going to introduce Jim Idelson, K1IR. Jim has been an active ham since 1972, which is the same year I joined the ham fraternity. Towers have always been a part of his ham radio life, including his activity in public service, satellites, field day, repeater operation, and contesting. Jim climbed his first tower when he was 13 years old. Tonight, he will talk about his recent research on tower safety. Jim brings together his long experience with tower work and a passion for data analysis to bring new insight to the topics. So welcome, Jim. Thank you for all your help here.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's been good working with you to bring this thing to fruition. And it's great to see everybody here. I'm looking at everybody on the gallery view. If you haven't figured out the tool yet, in the upper right, there is a button you can push that says, it either says speaker view or gallery view.
NIDXA.
And in the gallery view, you get to see up to 25 thumbnails of your friends on a page. And then on the right side, you can click and move to the next page. And it looks like we have, I don't know exactly how many we have in right now.
43.
What's that?
43.
Okay, and I see Jerry and CJ are in the waiting room. So we got a couple more coming in.
Got him. I got him. Take a welcome, Jerry and CJ.
Okay. Let me just preamble this a little bit with some observations about what's been going on over the last, month or so. We all got news of what's going on, and we've all been hunkered down. And it's been really interesting to see how our community has responded to this. My business for the last 30 years almost has been in the conferencing and collaboration business. And using these tools has been part of my life for all those years. And it's been really interesting to see how our ham radio community has started to pick up on these kinds of tools since we've had to. Our desire to get together and maintain our relationships and keep things alive is certainly not taking a rest while we all have to stay at home. So it's great to see the use of this technology happening. Some of you are certainly very familiar with these things, but what's been really very gratifying has been to see some people who were previously never exposed to this stuff give it a try. And I've gotten some emails saying things like, wow, Jim, I never did anything like that. It's amazing. And my view is that this does not replace on-the-air activities. Is it true that you guys normally have a net afterwards or something on 80 meters?
Yeah, there's a small group that gets together on 80 meters, 3702. And there's probably 10 or 12 that check in once in a while. There's about 7 of us that are there most of the time.
Okay, cool. Well, you know, this doesn't replace that. It augments. And, you know, I believe that what's going to happen here is that after the panic is over, after we're back in doing things that we've been doing, that we were doing before all this happened to us, we're going to still continue to use these tools. And so, and they'll make us better as clubs, better as a community. In the YCCC world, by the way, let me ask everybody to find their mute button and go on mute, because there's a little bit of background noise, and that's all okay, but it's
I'll
better
hit the
if
mute all, Jerry. Jim, I'll hit the mute all, and you unmute yourself.
Okay, okay. Wow, that really worked. Okay, good. So in YCCC, what we've noticed is we've done a couple of meetings. We've got another one scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, which was going to be a general meeting over a pretty wide territory. And we've noticed that where we normally get 30, 35 people in a meeting that you have to drive to, we're getting 50. We're getting more than 50 coming via video. So there are some real pluses to using these tools. Okay, enough on that. Let me switch to my first slide. Give me a second here. And I'm going to go into sharing mode.
Those who just entered, we're all in mute right now, and Jim's got the floor.
Okay, Jim's trying to figure it all out. Hang on. Okay, is my title slide visible?
Yes.
Yes.
And do you see me in a corner or something like that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. Perfect. That's the way it's supposed to work. Okay. Well, welcome to this discussion on amateur radio tower safety. I never thought that I was going to be talking about this. This came upon me in a, you know, it kind of just fell in my lap. And you'll see in the discussion that follows how that all happened. In this presentation, you'll see some things that will feel close to you, things that will make you feel something. You'll see some data. If you like data and analytics like I do, you'll see that kind of stuff. And you'll see some of the practical implications. And you'll, towards the end, we'll talk about the problem that we have and how we need to behave differently in order to solve the problem. Okay. All right, let's see if we can get this thing going. This is what started it all for me. October 31, 2018 was the day we lost Paul. And that hit me pretty hard. I didn't know Paul extremely well, but I had met him from, you know, every year in Dayton and had a few casual conversations with him. And then later in July of 2019, here in New England, we lost a guy, Joe, K1JGA, when he was taking down, he was helping take down a tower for a friend. And those were the two that I knew about. As the research started, I learned about these others. And what we have here is a series of fatalities that were all directly related to work on amateur radio towers. And this was pretty startling to me. I was wondering very quickly whether this was a big problem or a small problem, whether it was something that was a blip or whether it was a trend. And I started to talk to our club, YCCC, about it, and I was invited to do a talk at the New England Division Convention last year. And so I put together all this research. I wanted to do this in a, so let's keep going here. 4 and 12 months, bad news. So I wanted to take a look at this problem in a manner that would be new. We've heard the word novel recently a lot. We've heard after every time we hear of a very serious injury or we hear of a fatality like this, there's, for a short time, relatively short time, measured in a few weeks, we hear people talking about why did it happen, what could have been done differently, and then the discussion kind of fades away. But then we have another one. So it was my view that we needed to do something different. So here's the approach I took. First thing I wanted to do is understand whether we have a big problem or a smaller one. Then if we do have a bigger one, I wanted to further pursue this and look at what were some of the underlying causes and try to see if there were systemic things at play here or whether it was all random. And then finally, if there was anything we could do, what would it be? You know, what kind of action could we take? So this presentation is broken up pretty much into those 3 sections. And what I'll do is I'd love to have some interactivity here. I do want to keep it rolling. So, you know, maybe I can take some breaks or something and invite some questions, maybe after each of these 3 sections, something like that. Okay. First thing I want to do, let's see if I can do this easily. Maybe not while I am presenting. I'm going to stop the share for a second. And I put together a poll. I'm going to launch the poll. Tell me if you see the poll.
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
The purpose of the poll is to see how much of our audience here this topic should be directly relevant to. Ah, great. The technology is working. "27 of 42 have responded. "33, 34. Let's see if we can get most everybody in. All right, it's flattening out. Oh, a big jump, 37. Okay, all right, that's pretty good. Let me see now if this works. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Can you all see results?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, it's still working. Okay, good. So let's see, look at this. I own 1 or more towers wins. We also have, I accept help from others with my tower projects. I help others do tower work. I climb towers. Okay, I think, and then at the very end, we have 3 people on the call who said none of the above apply to me. So that's under 10%. So I think 90% of you should be able to hopefully take something away from this that will be directly relevant to you. Okay, thank you for doing that. Let me return to the share. All right, we're back in business.
Except we still have the.
That looks good.
Okay. So let's dive into the first question. First question is, how big a problem do we really have? In doing this kind of analysis, the first thing that came to mind is, how can I compare compare this rate of fatalities to something else. And one of the things that I learned pretty quickly is that in the world of professions and occupations, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks every year. They track the number of workers in a whole slew of occupations, and they track injury and fatality data for people who are working in those occupations. What that results in is a normalized number which tells us per 100,000 full-time equivalents in a particular occupation how many fatalities we expect to see in that job in a year, okay? And across all occupations, in the US, all occupations combined on average, we see 3.6 workers lose their life on the job per 100,000 full-time equivalents, okay? So there's our baseline number, all right? So that includes office workers and includes, steel workers. So everything across the board in terms of the range of risk. The next thing we did is to look for something that was somewhat comparable to amateur radio tower work to try to see if we could get a number in that area that would be useful. Turns out that in 2012, this group called ProPublica is kind of an online investigative journalism group. They investigate all kinds of things. And PBS, the Frontline team, got together and looked at what appeared to be a significant problem with the increased rollout of, I think it was 3G services at that time. They were rolling out a lot of towers, and there were problems in terms of loss of life amongst these tower workers. And they did a whole bunch of very good research, and they were able to come up with the fatality rates in the same terms that we were talking about that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses. And here's the number. At that time, there were around 300,000 commercial cell towers in the US, about 5,000 full-time equivalent workers. In that industry, there were a good number of part-time workers. So the actual number of workers is larger than the number of full-time equivalent workers. And that represents 10 million worker hours per year. So what we had was, then we do the math and do the division, and in order to come up with a number that's comparable to others, we had to scale up to 100,000. So from 5,000 full-time equivalent workers, we scale up to get to 100,000. Okay, so you can see that that's a factor of about 20, and you can see that from that, the data that they used, which was from 2003 to 2011, there were an average of 10.5 fatalities per year, and the scaled up number to match the 100,000 becomes about 200. Okay, so much, much more risky than the average profession, if the average profession is at that number that we saw before, 3.6. So the question is, next question is, can we do this in the amateur tower climbing area? And the answer turned out not arrived at easily, but the answer was yes. Okay. What we initially used was that 4 fatalities in that 12-month period as our fatality rate, but we had to come up with a model to figure out how much climber time, how many full-time equivalent workers. And we did that. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth right here in this presentation on how we did that, but we did an actual estimate nationwide of the number of amateur radio towers in the US. And that was based on some direct observation. We looked at ham QTHs across the country, hundreds of them, and figured out a penetration rate, essentially, of amateur radio towers in the amateur radio community. And then we made an assumption that every tower in the community required at least 24 hours of climber time per year. So we end up with a total number of hours, 38,000 times 24, which is that 912,000, and you divide that by the number of hours a worker can do in a year, and you come up with this number of 456 full-time equivalent climbers. Now that's obviously not right. We have many more climbers because none of us climbs full-time. But in terms of, in order to do the comparison, we had to normalize it by using a full-time equivalent number. And guess what? Look at what that results in. Almost 900. Okay, so 4 times the rate. And I hate to tell you one other thing. One other thing, I won't go into any detail, but I learned that in that same year, we lost one other person. I just found this out just a month ago, and I haven't incorporated it into the data yet. So if you thought 900 was high, it's actually another it's almost 1,000 or over 1,000. Okay, so this is not good news. I also wanted to look at some other area, some other thing that's considered risky work, and see how we compare it to that. And the way I came up with this was in one of the first audiences that I spoke to, there was a guy in the audience who was a skydiver. And he spoke to me afterwards about some stuff. So I said, let's do a comparison with skydiving. Skydiving is tracked by a group called the U.S. Parachute Association in the United States. They track all the same kinds of things we want to know about. They know how many jumps are done, and they have great communication with all the local jump areas, drop zones. I think they call them drop zones. And in what we saw here was that in that one year, 2018, there were 3.3 million jumps across the US and 13 associated fatalities. So that, when you, again, do a normalization, that was 1 fatality per every almost quarter, or a little over 250,000 jumps. 1 fatality per 250,000 jumps. So what's the right way to do it, a comparison with us? Tower climbing, what we did was we took the annual requirement for maintenance or whatever, and we made the estimate that for all those 38,000 towers, that each one required 4 climbs per year, per tower per year, all right? As you know, obviously, some of us are scampering up and down our towers all the time, but others are just dormant for year after year after year after they were first erected. So we felt this was a reasonable estimate. 152,000 climbs, 4 fatalities in the last month, 1 fatality per 38,000 climbs. Okay, I think you're getting the message. 1 fatality per 250,000 jumps, 1 fatality per 38,000 climbs. So relative to commercial tower climbing, a 4x rate. Relative to skydiving, 7 times. So I answer the question, at least at that level of research, my answer to the question is we do have a problem, and it's really something we need to look at. Ask me a question.
They're all muted. We have to unmute them.
They can. Everybody has mute
Just
control.
unmute if you're going to ask a question.
Yep. Okay.
Well, the next question is what are you going to do about it?
All right. Okay. Okay. So the next question is, what's underlying this? Are there some underlying issues or specific problems? And in order to do that, we have to look much closer at the data. And I think we needed to look at a lot more data. So we have data. I scoured the history that was available on the internet and every other source I could find going back to 2000. So we have data here from 2000 through 2019. And what you see here is a list of incidents and the dates they occurred, the location, the name and call sign of a fatality. You'll note that 2/3 of the way down the page, there was one incident that took 3 lives. So we have 14 incidents here, 16 fatalities. And we're going to use this data, but we augmented this data a little bit for a particular reason. Let me explain. We're not just trying to solve a problem of fatalities. We're trying to solve a problem of injuries. Fatalities are much better documented. We don't have good records of all the injuries that are occurring. Many of you have probably heard of, or perhaps even been on site when something's happened, but those things don't get captured anywhere. So we got to figure out what to do about that. I wanted to understand what the ratio of injuries per fatality might be in our community. So I took a look at data, again, data from government stuff. Overall, when OSHA goes out and investigates incidents, they get, so every year, they get, for every fatality, and this is just fall related data, so there's all kinds of incidents that occur, but for falls, they get 183 reported injuries per every fatal fall, okay? And they also believe, and there's a bunch of research around this, that upwards of 80% of injuries don't even get reported. So if 183 is 20%, multiply by 5. So there could be 1,000 injuries per every fatal injury that gets reported related to falls. Could that be the ratio that we have in our community? I don't know. But I do know that there are a whole lot of injuries. I know that they happen, you know, we hear about them, and it's really makes sense to try to do something about this. Okay. So with that in mind, there were actually, as I was doing the research on fatalities, I did run into some incidents, and some of these call signs you'll recognize, of people who sustained very serious injuries in the course of doing tower work. And we added this data to the data that we analyzed in order to drill down to some of the root causes. Okay, so the data that you've seen on the fatality page and on this page is added together in the analysis that we're going to do in the next few pages. Okay, so we started to ask some questions about all these incidents. First question is, what actually happened? So this is a breakdown of the classes of incidents that occurred. You can see that the big red one here is fell with the tower attached, also known as riding the tower down. The second biggest one, 37%, 7 incidents, was free fall. That means falling from the tower because of not being attached, okay? The other 2 were single incidents. One was an actual injury by the tower. Something failed on the tower while they were up there and caused a fatal injury. And the last one was an electrocution. Okay. All right, next. What other questions can we ask? Here we're going to break down the types of incidents as we did on the previous slide, but this time into 2 groups. The first group is during the process of installing or removing the tower. So look at this. A total of 10 out of the 18 incidents fell with the tower and attached to it. And 1 was a free fall from the tower during installation or removal. The installation and removal is kind of the bookends of the lifetime of a tower, right? You install it, it's up for years and years and years, and then you take it down. Well, actually, that's not true. You put it up, sometimes you put it up at the beginning of field day and take it down at the end of field day. So it's not always years in between. But in between the time that the tower is installed and removed, there's the maintenance period. That's the time when you go up and change a feed line or fix an antenna or replace an antenna or whatever. And look at the mix here. There were 0 fell with the tower attached during maintenance, and there were a whole bunch, 6 free falls, and 1 again an injured by tower. Okay, so something's starting to pop out here already, I hope. Another interesting point in the data is the types of towers that were involved in these incidents. Guide represented almost 3/4. There was 1 self-supporting crank-up, 1 self-supporting fixed height tower, and there were a few that I just couldn't figure out from the data that I was able to dredge up. Okay. Okay. So now let's link things together. Falling with a tower was almost, with a tower, riding the tower down is invariably linked to the tower being in a state that was unsafe for climbing. Okay. Falling from a tower is invariably linked to being inadequately attached to the tower by having the wrong climbing equipment or not using it correctly. And then there's a third kind of miscellaneous bucket that we call unsafe maneuvers. And these are things where not having the right team, not having the right expertise, just doing some stuff wrong caused a really tragic event to happen. Okay. PPE, man, we've heard the term PPE a lot lately. 2 months ago when I said PPE, nobody knew what it was. Now I think everybody does. Okay. All right. And then, so now taking the same data set and mapping it all together, we've got climbing an unsafe tower as the primary root cause, free climbing or incorrectly using personal protection equipment, second, and then a smaller group, 15%, caused by doing some sort of unsafe maneuver. All right. What's interesting here now is that it sure looks like we've got 2 big problems. And if we can solve both of those problems, we can eliminate 85% of these serious incidents. And I believe that the injuries, that large number of injuries probably also follows in these same ratios. So climbing an unsafe tower and climbing using the wrong equipment and procedure. All right, next page. Now I'm going to talk about those all 3 of those things in specific. I make a statement here, and the key word that you see in this is we knowingly climb unsafe guide towers. So remember okay, important to note, I didn't say this before, 100% of the fatalities that occurred with a tower that was falling over and somebody riding a tower down was that it was a guide tower or a tower that was supposed to be guide. Okay. What we see in the data here is that we tend to work on these towers, do things on towers during the installation and removal phases that we shouldn't be doing. Okay. A guide tower must be truly safe to climb, not just when it's installed and everything is up and you're doing maintenance, but during the installation and removal process as well. If you're going to climb it, it should be climbable. It should be safe to climb. So what does that mean? It means that the tower has to be properly guide. And how do you do that? You put in temporary guides. Okay, temporary does not mean poor guiding. And what is poor guiding? Poor guiding might be tent stakes for anchors. Rope, regular rope is often used, and it's not good because it's stretchy and it's not going to work, or it can fail. Not guying the tower at the right vertical spacing, and finally, not tensioning it as if it was going to be permanent. So when you approach a tower, even during the construction or removal process, and you plan to climb it to do something, it should feel and be done in a way that you really feel confident would withstand long-term stresses, not just the stresses that you think, oh, it's good enough for the next hour. because that's the moment that things fail and they can go really badly. Okay. So here's, what's that? Somebody drawing pictures? Okay. Last summer, late in the summer, we had an opportunity. I was actually working on this presentation. I was working on this research, and we had an opportunity to do a tower takedown. And we used that opportunity to demonstrate a method that works. This particular tower was originally, I think it was 70 or 80 feet of Rome 45. We removed it the normal way down to this level here, which you see it's currently at. It has the lowest section is embedded in concrete. So there's like 3 or 4 feet in concrete. And then there are 3 10-foot sections above that. And the top set of guy wires that you see there is attached somewhere in that 4th section up. Okay. So what did we do? We set a set of temporary guys at the top of this section called section C. Okay. So there were 2 sections above that. Is that right? Yeah, I'm looking. I have something obstructing my my screen here. So we did that. We moved it down 2 sections. Then we took the permanent guys that were up top and moved them down. So now what we had is 2 sets of guys. And by the way, these were all tightened up with come-alongs and turnbuckles and everything. And they were attached to the original anchors. Another point I want to make about taking down a tower where you've never been to that QTH before is to be really careful. We could not see for sure that there was concrete underneath the anchors. So the guy who was asking us to take the thing down told us that there were anchors there. Well, what we did was we took a piece of rebar and we pounded it into the ground until we hit anchor. And we did that in 3 or 4 spots around the guy anchor rod to make sure that we actually were working with a tower that had proper anchors. So we tightened the thing up close to the right tension, and then we went up and took down the top 2 sections, removed sections A and B. Then we removed the guys at the upper set of guys, leaving that one last set down below. And we got off the tower. We got off the tower. The tower now is only 2.5 sections high. And we released the guy wires that were the remaining guy wires at the anchors. So nobody's on the tower at this time. And the thing is freestanding. And as I said, it was embedded in concrete. So in fact, it was pretty solid. And then we cut the legs at the concrete, so at the surface of the concrete, and let it fall. So nobody was on the tower at any time when the thing wasn't really guyed very, very well. Okay. All right. In that case, we had a base where the concrete, where the lowest section was buried in concrete. When we hear about these types of removals, these types of tower removal projects, we often hear, and this was the case in the New Hampshire, where Joe, K1JGA, and his friend were taking the tower down. They had it down to something like 20 feet. I don't know exact numbers. And they removed the guy wires at that level while they were still on the tower. They unbolted them from the guy bracket or whatever, however they were attached there. And they were assuming that the base was going to be solid enough to hold the tower up. And it wasn't. Okay. And we've heard this story multiple times, that the base was weak for some reason. Let me show you some pictures of some bases. Here's a base, some sort of Rhone base. The corrosion that you see here is very severe, and it was below grade. It was probably not visible, you know, before the dirt was dug away around that base. Here's another one. I don't think these bolts don't look like factory design. I don't know what this is, but would you trust it? I don't know. Here's another. This is the one that we actually did. That one that we did in local here. It's kind of strange. Look at the way that is. I don't understand that. So we didn't want to trust that base. We never needed to the way we did it. Okay, that the message is a base is an unknown, and guide towers in general are not designed to be kept vertical by their base. Pretty rare. Okay. Next point, we free climb. So free climbing. So we've covered the problem of falling with a tower. It almost always happens when climbing is being done, when the work is being done during maintenance or removal, and when the tower is down to at that low level, either putting up the first few sections or taking down. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about this idea of free climbing. Everybody go on mute. I'm hearing a little background. Okay. So free climbing. What is free climbing? Well, I'm going to play a little video here of what we all I think of as free climbing. See if I can hear this. There's a little bit of sound with this.
I'm going to the top.
Yeah, don't you dare.
Go for it, man. I saw 420 up the top of his 80 feet with a ratchet strap around him.
He's nuts.
He is. He's like a man.
So monkey, man.
So when I changed my 6-meter antenna, mine's 31 foot long now. But it was 21 foot long.
He climbed that
19
thing.
foot long. So this guy at work used to work on windmills. He says, "Oh, I can climb your tower." So he.
By
just
the way,
did it a
this
few months
does
ago.
not end badly. So don't worry.
He took down the antenna that was there and he roped the 31 footer alongside on his belt and just climbed it. He had the harness.
Some people are good at that stuff. I'm not.
And I had one rope like as a guide, right?
Yeah.
To keep the wind was kind of swinging it around. And he put that fucker up there, tightened it up.
Wow.
I'm not good with heights, dude, at all. I get up on
I
the
think
roof,
I
I'm
would
fucking
do it if
queasy.
I
That ain't no higher than the roof next door.
It still hurt.
I'm not going up there. Take your time.
Whoops. Okay. Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Did that come through? Okay. So this guy was clearly climbing without any personal protection equipment, nothing at all.
It's not streaming anything anymore.
What's that? Did somebody have a comment? I heard somebody. Let's do the mute again. Okay. All right. So what is free climbing? Free climbing is not allowed. You don't want to free climb. But what is free climbing? Free climbing is not being 100% attached the moment you step foot on the tower. So that means, and what does attached mean? It means having some sort of a line, a solid line from you to a point on the tower that's reliable. Okay, you're going to see some discussion later of the ways some of us climb, which is not quite there and leaves some substantial room for something bad to happen. Okay, in the commercial world, this concept is very well defined in standards from ANSI and OSHA, and we can learn a lot from them. Okay. More on free climbing. So here I have some pictures here of people doing some free climbing. This fellow is wearing a waist belt. I can't tell whether it's just a tool belt or whether it's actually whether he's actually attached. This guy has scampered up the side of a crank-up tower to help with a rope or a feed line or something, but it appears that all he went up with is a tool bag. Does this look familiar? I'd say this is field day. And this looks like another crank up. And the fellow at the top there is swinging that little lanyard around. And I guess eventually he's planning to be attached. And if you look at the anchors for this, I can't tell you that they look very reliable to me. And I'm sure, and these are ropes holding this thing up. And guess what? Look at this one. Here's another field day. And look at the base on this one. I don't know if I would rely on that base and more ropes. This guy who has a proper full body harness on, and he has a good helmet. He's got a lot of good stuff going on, but I don't believe he is properly 100% attached because he's only using what's called a positioning harness. That's positioning lanyard, which goes around the outside of the tower. You know, in a worst case situation, if he lost his footing, looks like he could fall at least down to where those guy wires attach at the bottom of the picture. I thought this was interesting. I don't know what this guy's doing. And then there's this guy here. This guy is standing on the top of a Roan 25 with a waist harness only and two positioning harness just going around the mast. And if you can't recognize him, that guy's me. That picture was taken in 1997. Okay. So the concept of being 100% attached and having this fall arrest capability is really important. 100% attach is only possible if you have the right equipment to do it. And it's only possible if you use the equipment that you have and that you wear, okay? The concept of the fall arrest lanyard, I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. In fact, this is the point where we go do a demo. So let me get rid of these. And I'm going to go over to a spot where I can show you some of this actual hardware. Okay. Hey, I'm over here. This is Studio B. Can you hear me okay?
Could be a little louder.
Could be a little louder. All right, I will try to, I have a microphone right here. Actually, let me move this mic. I have a microphone right above me. I'll try to stay close to it. Okay. When I started climbing towers, before I probably climbed my first tower with nothing. Probably climbed to 20 feet, put my arm around a leg, and did some piece of work like remove a PL259 and came back down the tower. Sometime, probably within a couple of years of that, a friend who was a telephone lineman gave me a belt that looks like this. Have everybody seen something like this before? It's made of leather. It's got a belt and a clasp, and it has two rings on either side, and it has this lanyard, and this is a positioning lanyard, as I mentioned. Now, these things can fail in a number of ways, or you can, if you lose your footing, you can slide down whatever it is you're strapped around, unless you put this thing through the rungs of the tower. Some do, some don't. And there have been cases when people have been known to be severely injured by simply slipping out of this thing, since it only goes around the waist. And if it slips down like this, or you slip out of it this way, it can be bad news. So OSHA and others decided that this was no longer a tower climbing adequate device some years ago. When I was up that tower in 1997, I was wearing this belt. Okay, so this one is a waist belt as well, but it adds these leg supports. So these go around your thighs, and that prevents that slipping out of the belt problem from happening. So if you were to flip over upside down, this thing could not come off you that way. I was also using this kind of positioning lanyard, which went around the mast. This one is designed for Roan 25, I think. This one goes around the tower and gives me a way to lean back. But it also included this. This they call some call a cattail. It's also called a dual lanyard. And here I would, while climbing the tower, clip this onto one rung, climb up a couple of steps, and then clip the next one on, and alternate going up the tower. Now, this thing also became, this was OSHA okay for quite some time, but eventually it became no longer satisfactory, because if you were to fall and be hung by something at your waist, the chances of hurting your back very severely were pretty high. The second thing is, this thing, if you were to fall and fall 2 or 3 feet and be stopped by this thing, this would be an awfully fast stop, and could be very damaging to your body. So this thing is no longer acceptable. What's now acceptable today, in today's world, we use this kind of thing. This is a full body harness. It has a belt around the center, and it has leg straps like the other, but it goes up over your shoulders. And the fall rest is all attached at this D-ring, which is at the top of your back when it's put on. Okay, let me put that down for a second. And what's attached at the top on that D-ring is this thing. This is what we call, this is a real OSHA-approved dual fall arrest lanyard. So these big gorilla hooks we use as we go up and down the tower. And should you fall, this material is designed to stretch a bit, to tear. It actually tears at the end of when it's trying to stop you, and it decelerates at a slower rate. So it limits how much jerk you will feel as you stop. And actually, a lanyard like this is a single-use thing, and there's an indicator on here somewhere to tell whether it's been deployed in an accident, and you replace it if that happens. Okay, so, and then like the other one I showed you, there's the option to add a positioning lanyard like this, and this one is kind of cool because it's adjustable. And so you can decide how far back you want to be or how tight up to the tower you want to be. Okay, enough on that. Now what I want to do is show you what it looks like to actually be using this. This is some video taken. On the left side, you're going to see me climbing the tower. And the spot that I'm climbing the tower is a place where I have to climb past an obstruction. The obstruction is an antenna that's mounted on a swinging gate side mount. So there's a lot of metal, and you can't just slide things up. You have to move your attachment. And what you'll see is that I have to release the positioning lanyard, so that's dropped. And then you'll see me climb up a little bit and move the dual fall arrest lanyards up alternately, as I was describing before, until I get past the obstruction. And on the right side is a GoPro view of the same thing. So here I set one of the dual fall arrest, and I'm going to release the positioning lanyard, and we should be able to climb up a few steps. I think I was at about 50 feet when I was doing this, something like that. So another moving one of the legs of the fall arrest lanyard. And now I'm up above the obstruction and I can reattach the positioning lanyard. Okay. Okay. So that's the story on how to stay attached to the tower. If you do all that, it's really hard to fall off a tower if you're attached to using that kind of gear. And there's just too many of us who either don't have the right gear or take shortcuts and don't always use it when we should, even when we're tired, even when we're, shorthanded or whatever. Okay. Can I answer any questions at this point about that topic? Okay.
There do seem to be some questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's a question that CJ asked about in the chat room about what advice you would have for somebody that's just about to put up a tower, that kind of thing. So,
yeah. Okay, so first of all, the tower design itself needs to be safe. Standard things apply, like don't if you have the opportunity to get a building inspector and a permit to build it, it's a good thing. It's a great thing. A lot of people are afraid of the building department. The building department is your friend. When you have a project that's approvable and approved, and you get those people in to help, they have done a lot of construction, and they can give you very good feedback. Sometimes they'll require drawings and such. It's all worthwhile doing. I would say that building in your method for how you're going to be safe on the tower right from the start is a good idea as well. And by the way, I want to point out, this is not the only way to climb a tower. There are other ways. There are these lines. I forgot what they're called. Maybe somebody knows. There's a type of climbing apparatus that has a solid wire, heavy wire, that goes up to the top of the tower after the tower has been installed, and it stays there permanently. And you attach yourself to it using a clip as you climb. And the clip is an ascender. It only allows you to go up. In order to come down with it, you have to actively disengage it. So if you were in a falling situation, you wouldn't be able to fall more than a few inches with one of those things engaged. So I would say that, choosing your methodology for maintenance and what kind of equipment you want to use would be something that you want to think about on the day that you design the tower. It's part of the design. Okay.
Hey, Jim, wasn't that what AIH was using? Some kind of, what you just mentioned, some wire going up the...
Yeah, he was doing that. He was not using that. Had he been using something like that, he wouldn't have fallen very far.
Oh, okay.
He was doing something called that people call riding the line, and it's just there's a pulley up at the top and some kind of a rope or something going over the pulley and pulling, and it's a very convenient way to move up and down, but unless it's done really perfectly, it has risk. In the commercial tower business, it is actually allowed, but it's very tightly regulated. Very tightly regulated.
What does that use?
I've
Snoring?
unmuted everybody so you can answer some questions. So, Eric, you have a question?
Yeah, the other one was on your video, Jim, you were going up and you only use one of the dual arrests. Why wouldn't you use both just for extra?
No, I did. They were both attached.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
They're both attached. I don't remember if I was alternating. I thought I was alternating, but they were definitely both attached.
Oh, okay. I missed that then.
The one you didn't see was sort of on the back side of the tower.
Oh, okay.
I think that's all. Okay. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So the last category of things that we want to try to avoid, by the way, at this point, if we do the things with the guide towers correctly and we do the things with climbing the towers with the right stuff, we're down to the 15% that's left. All right, we dealt with the top 85% of problems. So the last is tough. It's that random, it's that, you know, hard to define, very varied kinds of incidents that can happen. Here are two. In the data that we had, the first one was the one I told you about earlier, the electrocution. This was a situation where 3 people were working on raising some kind of an antenna support. It was going to be against the side of a house. So there were 2 people at the bottom trying to tip the thing up, and the third person was standing on the roof to catch it and pull it in. And then they were going to secure it somehow. Well, they lost control of this thing, and it fell on some kind of power line, and everybody touching it lost their life. Okay, so what do you do about that? I mean, all of us know about the dangers of doing stuff near power lines. Here's a case where things went really awry. Okay, the second one that I'll tell you about, this one happened in the Pacific Northwest. A big 40-meter Yagi was being taken down. It was on a 100-foot guide tower. There was 1 person up on the tower, and there were some people on the ground. And from what I read, it appeared that they had pretty limited tools that they were working with. What happened? The antenna fell up top there. So it had been removed from its rotating structure. Well, you know, I don't remember where that was. I think it was just a mast. It was a regular mast and a rotor mounted down below, and it was hanging there, and something broke, and the antenna fell and hit an upper guy wire, and the other 2 guy wires tension pulled the top down, and the tower collapsed, and that climber lost his life. So these things are all over the place, and you can imagine any number of other scenarios where things like this could happen. So what's the answer here? We can't come up with a specific set of actions like we talked about in the others. It's really about knowing your limits. Probably the biggest thing is knowing your limits, whether they be knowledge or experience or not having enough people or tools. These are all things that you need to be aware of and pay really close attention to, and be conservative. So, you know, when it's getting late and the sun is going down and the job isn't done and 2 people have left, it's probably time to come down the tower, even if the contest starts in 2 hours. Okay. All right. I want to introduce you to a guy who has a story to tell. His name is Dennis Cornell. He lives in Alaska now. And let me play this interview I did with him a couple days ago. Hey, Dennis, how long have you been a ham? And tell us a little bit about how you got started in tower climbing.
Hi, Jim. I'm glad to join you tonight. I've been an active ham since 1966. Long time ago. I'm 70 years old. I started climbing towers when I was 16 years old.
Tell me about how you learned to climb and how you gained knowledge about how to work on towers.
I learned the same way as many others my age. As a kid, I made it up as I went along. I was invincible. Looking back on those days, I can't believe some of the things I did. I just bought the towers and put them up. I had no help. I suggest you get an Elmer, somebody that knows how to do it. Somebody like yourself that can tell you the right things to do and the wrong things to do. I just winged it, and I was lucky up until 2012.
Tell us what happened in 2012.
Oh, Lord. Well, in 2012, I was taking down a 50-foot guide tower. I was working alone. I didn't tell my girlfriend I was outside. I was belted in at 30 feet. I had it down to 30 feet, and it was guided 30 feet. and the tower guys were still attached. It had been a long day. I had done this job many times before, and I knew what I needed to do next. I should have put guy ropes at 20 foot, but I didn't. I made a bad choice, a choice that changed my life forever. I decided to trust the base to hold the tower up while I completed the job. While on the tower, I removed one of the remaining 3 guy wires, setting off a devastating chain of events. The tower came crashing down with me on it. It happened that quick. I ended up with a blown shoulder. The right elbow was gone, broken ribs, pelvis, and hip. I'm permanently disabled as a result of that one tiny decision. I was lucky though. Had I been on a different side of the tower, I would have been crushed and would not be here to talk to you today. I hit a 4-foot diameter tree trunk.
You've had years of experience and you've done this job before. Was there something that you missed, something you should have done?
Oh boy, yeah. I lived by always guying the tower. I should have put ropes on it at 20 feet, okay? And then when I dropped 10 foot down, I should have dropped down another set of guys and guided at 10 feet. I broke my own rule and it almost killed me.
Tell us a little bit about what you learned. What were the key lessons from that experience, and how can our listeners here avoid learning these lessons the same hard way that you did?
Well, have a good safety harness on. Get help. Tell people that you're going up. Don't do it yourself. I was macho. I knew how to do it. I've been doing it for 45 years. Get help. You know, admit you can't do it by yourself. And then do it right. Do it safely. And live to tell somebody else how to do it correctly.
Thanks, Dennis. It's been great having you with us.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
So Dennis's story is not unusual. There were other people who've had almost the identical experience. Some of them are contesters, we know. So we got to figure out a way to make this not happen. So the next step in this is to talk about how do we make the change happen. And I think about it in 2 ways. One is at the individual level, things that we can do on our own. And then there's at the community level. I'm going to talk about both of those. So individual first. So as an individual, you got to make the choice. You just got to decide that safety is going to be a high priority. You got to develop this safety mindset, you know, build it into the culture. When you invite people over, if you see that people don't have the right tools or, you know, or the right attitude, you address it. You gotta really get into that mode. And finally, it's a commitment. It's for the long term. It's something you got to really tend to every time. So for me, what did that mean? The picture on the left was the 1997 picture. And on the right is a picture, you know, with all the right stuff and trying to do things correctly. You can see on the left, we talked about that already. On the right, I've added the equipment, the helmet, the full body harness, all of that. I accepted that there was some cost involved. It was about $500 to get equipped with this stuff. But the big one is that I also accepted the changes in the way the job would go. You saw me climbing before on that, climbing around that antenna. I estimate it takes 3 times as long to climb, and that it takes 3 times as long to move around to transition from one spot on the tower to another. You got to build it into the work plan. It's just the way it is. Okay. And you got to get the rest of the team needs to buy into that same understanding. Okay. Now, if we can do it individually, we got to figure out how to get the word out and get other people to be sensitized to this. So let's talk about the community level. We need to make the decision to act for the good of the community, first of all. there's, you know, when I see those numbers, 7 times skydiving, 4 times commercial tower climbing, these are problems. And when you hear of your friends losing their lives, I think it's something worthwhile addressing. Okay. So what do we need to do? At the community level, the opportunity is to not just prevent those fatalities, but all these other injuries that we've talked about. And to do it everywhere in the world, in every facet of amateur radio. Here, I'm talking to, you know, you and I, we do a lot of the same stuff. But those people who run big MCON networks and large networks of repeaters, they are climbing towers as well. And they're exposed to all the same risks. So this opportunity to do better exists in every facet of our hobby. But there are some issues, some things we need to deal with. The size of the community is huge. 800,000 of us here in the US, 3.5 million worldwide. We're spread out all over the world. We need to figure out how to get to all of those people. They represent all those different interests in amateur radio that we talk about. Some are affiliated with clubs, large and small. Clubs are a great way to convey messages like this. And the level of awareness and knowledge and the attitudes that our people have vary a lot as well. We need to figure out how to talk to them no matter where they are in the safety journey. And then finally, there's a cost element to it. It's going to cost something to do this. So the idea is, let's talk about this knowledge and awareness stuff. We've got people who are simply unaware, and I've met a whole bunch of them. They're in the experience that I've had in giving this talk has been that frequently somebody comes to me afterwards and said, I had no idea. And I've been doing this for so long. Where do I buy the gear? Let me just go get it done. Okay. And I think there's a very large number of us who would act immediately were they made aware. The second is the group that maybe actually is aware, but because of some barriers, whatever those barriers are, they haven't taken the action that they need to take, like getting the equipment. So you need to actually buy it, and you need to know where to buy it. And then finally, we have this last group. These are the tough ones, what we call the invincibles, what I call the invincibles. And those are the ones who say, I've been doing it all this time. Safety is your problem, not mine. You may think you're going to fall. I don't think I'm going to fall. And if I fall, it's not your problem. Well, in fact, it is. If, you know, what others do reflects on all of us as a community. So we need everybody to figure out how to be safe. So what do we have to do about this? First, we need to engage. We need to get this word out. So I've been doing this presentation. This is probably the 15th time or something that I've done this. But I've probably only reached a few hundred, 500 people, something like that directly. We've put some of these up on the internet, and there's been a few views, but we need to do a lot more. The second thing is we need to do more education. So once you're aware, you need to be educated. And you can see in this presentation, some of the education is being done, but there's a lot more to do there as well. And then finally, I have this idea of enabling. So the best example, again, is where do you get the harness and the lanyards? Most of our ham radio suppliers don't actually offer this stuff. We need to figure out a way to get the community to have these things readily, easily available. So the concept that's come out of this, with all the feedback that I got from presenting this and talking to people about it, people have sort of gotten pretty motivated to try to get this community-wide effort underway. And there are individuals like us, those of us who do the climbing. We're going to be the consumers, but we also need help from clubs, and we can use help from our amateur radio industry to help make things work. And what we've come up with is a concept of an alliance that's independent, that's focused specifically on safety, and in particular the issue of tower safety right now, and bringing these groups together and leveraging their various expertise and resources to be able to help solve the problem. So what we've done, we've actually created an organization. It's got a name. It's called the Zero Falls Alliance, and it's all about safety in amateur radio. We are staying focused initially on this amateur radio tower climbing, but there are other areas of safety that are definitely deserve attention. I mean, for example, we talked about field day earlier. Field day is a smorgasbord of safety opportunities, let's say. And we think there's some things we can do about educating and helping people be safer in that activity. We have a website. This is what the homepage looks like. You can sign up. The website is zerofalls.org. You can sign up as an individual. We also have club memberships. And to sign up, all you need to do is fill out a form. And you have to check the box at the bottom of this left-hand part with the green square around it. And that's a kind of a pledge. And all it is designed to do is to get you thinking and to make sure that you try to keep the idea of safety top of mind whenever you're doing anything that involves some personal risk. Okay. Inside, we have some materials available, different things to help with the education problem and with the reducing the barriers problem, getting rid of those barriers to being able to be successful. The first barrier that we have addressed is the climbing harness. So what we did was we went out to the most successful, the biggest company in the business that does fall protection equipment in the US. It's a company called GME Supply. They're a big company, international business. They sell almost exclusively really to commercial interests. I talked to them about the amateur radio world and the kinds of things we have going on, and they were very interested in helping us out. So what they did was they put together 2 packages. This is a low-end package that you're seeing up top. The bottom is a higher-end package. For $300, $350, you get all of the things you need. You get the harness, you get the fall arrest, you get the positioning, you get a tool bucket, you get gloves and a helmet. You really get everything you need to be able to safely climb. This stuff is orderable. I've already got a couple of people. This very recently came together. I've got a couple of people who want orders. We have to do the orders manually right now. You got to tell me, and I got to forward the orders. But this is the kind of thing we want to do, and we can imagine other opportunities to enable our community to be to do the things they need to do and do them safely. Okay. The team that's conceived of this and is kind of the steering committee is these people here. We have people on this list who represent tower climbing community, tower owners, commercial and amateur. We've got a guy on here, Dr. Brandt is a flight surgeon with NASA, and he does safety and safety-related programs for NASA all the time. The guy right below him, David Clark, works for one of the largest transportation companies, CSX Transportation, and he's in charge of all construction within CSX. He understands and will help us with this idea of creating a safety culture in our community, because that's what he does every day at CSX. Okay, that's it. We've got a bunch of clubs and other organizations signed up to help out. Signing up to help out means you can help us like fund the website development, stuff like that. We need volunteers. We need members. Being a member means you'll have access to all the information, and you can be a contributor as well. We need help with volunteers. Volunteers we need to help build a website, find content to put on the website, and to be evangelists. I'd love to sign somebody up from the 2 clubs that we have here to be that evangelist. We'll have a version of this presentation that you can give at a club meeting. And what would make sense is to give the presentation once a year, because you got new members cycling through the club. Everybody should see this. And it should be a 20-minute, 30-minute presentation just to raise awareness. Okay. That's all I have. I went probably 30 minutes longer than I expected to. I hope it was okay.
Well, worth it.
there were a bunch of people helped here. This slide is out of date already. I think we could double the number of names and call signs on here that have been helpful. That's all I have, and I'd love to discuss or answer any questions.
I've unmuted everybody so they can do that.
Yeah, Jim,
Yeah.
you mentioned a shorter version for presentation.
So first of all, whoever that is, first of all, let me.
Odd. And
I'm gonna stop sharing and get myself on the screen here. Are you in speaker view? Can you see me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. You had a little audio breakup. I didn't quite hear what you were asking.
there's shorter.
When is the go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, he wants to know if there's a shorter version of this program that can be done. Might not have an hour and a half.
Right. Okay. I'm working on that, and I think actually probably if somebody other than me presents the same slides, it won't go for an hour and a half. But yes, plan is to release a presentation that anybody can give, and that it should be a 30, 45-minute presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question.
I would actually, a lot of this came together with help from others. If anybody here has some suggestions of what parts of this are the most important, help me prioritize what should be in a half-hour version of this. That would be great.
Jim?
Yeah.
This is Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
My question is, or aspect that I didn't hear anything about is, we're not getting any younger. And what we climbed when we were 55, maybe not something we should be climbing now. With myself, I'm 76, and it feels like I could do what I wanted to do. But when you get up there, you may not have quite as much strength. But you didn't bring age into that at all, and that's a problem.
You're right. And I was reminded of that in two ways. One is I was speaking to Hector in the Southwest, XC2K. He's a professional tower climber for hams, and when he gave me feedback recently, he said, Jim, the first question any ham should ask is, am I capable of doing this work at all? Should I be contracting it out to a younger person with the skills and experience and tools? That was one thing. And do you remember earlier in the presentation I told you that there was one more fatality? Well, the one that I just learned of, and I apologize, I don't have the name and call sign here, but a fellow who climbed his tower, he was I don't want to say older. He was not a young man. He had a heart attack up on the tower.
Oh, geez.
And he was strapped in, and nobody else was outside, and you can imagine the rest of the story. So I think the age thing is significant, and we got to figure out a way to send that message.
Thanks.
So I agree.
Other questions? All right, Wally, you had a question.
No problem. Yeah, good evening. So I bought from Tower Tech, and I don't know if Tower Tech is still in business, my fall arrest harness and a lanyard ring and a bunch of other equipment. Has to be, oh gosh, 20 years ago. I'm wondering if there's a wear out period on this, because of, even though it doesn't get a lot of use, I would say probably since I bought it, I've been up on my tower half a dozen times.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I've learned some stuff about this. All right.
All right.
So first thing I want to say is that we are not regulated as amateurs. If you're not doing it professionally, not earning money, if you do it in your backyard, you're not regulated officially under those standards that we talked about, right? However, there's a lot we can learn from those guys. Now, one of the things that they have is a 5-year timeout for equipment, whether it's been used or not. And I think the assumption is, for example, that, hey, it might have been sitting in the back of a pickup truck and exposed to UV for 5 years, and it could condition could decline over time. But remember the guy I told you about earlier who was the skydiver?
Yeah.
I talked to him about that. He said in the skydiving world, they have inspectors who are certified by that U.S. Parachute Association, and they don't have these timeout things. They don't have mandatory anything, but if you bring them your chute and they inspect it, no matter how old it is, if the guy determines that it's safe, then you can keep using it.
Really?
So we don't have an equivalent here in our community, and to buy a $1,000 piece of equipment like that and have it hanging in your garage or in your basement for years and having it have little use, it probably is going to last a long time. So one of the challenges we have, I think, is to come up with standards and ways that we as a community can agree will be safe and effective, but for our kind of usage, for our model. That's something we need to do, and I think we could use some help. I would love to speak to one of those parachute guys and understand what kind of training they have and how they apply standards like that are voluntary standards.
We have another question.
How's that for an answer?
Good, thank you. Is there another question?
This is Mike, ND9G. Along the same lines as knowing how to check your gear, because it's great to have it, but you need to know how to check it and know if it's still good. I guess if you're worried about it, just buy new. You got to know how to use it properly, right? Having a dual fall arrest lanyard is great, but knowing simple things such as that you want to connect them at different heights is important to know, and many people don't know that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. So now let's talk about training. I'm in some discussions right now. The same people that I talked about that gave us the deal on the harnesses, they have a huge training division, and they would be interested in developing training for the amateur community. But as we all know, probably what we need is not off the shelf what they do for other fall protection kinds of environments. I think there probably would be some that would be straight off the shelf and would be usable, but we need to develop some other stuff. There's an opportunity here, and we need to work through that. And the other thing we have is cost. Usually a training course for a professional tower climber usually involves an on-site 1 or 2 day training class that involves hands-on, and it costs $1,500 or $2,000. So there's a segment of our community that could afford that, but it's not very big. So I think we need to look at our own needs and try to figure out what level of training we can do to get the average, to do what we need to do. For example, I think we could put together a purely online ground crew certification. So this is somebody who's not a climber. This is somebody who's not a climber, but somebody who goes over to your house and learns to, and helps out. There's a bunch of skills and knowledge that person should have. And maybe certain things they should automatically bring, like a proper helmet and a proper set of gloves. So I think there's different levels that we can attack, and we need to sort of figure out how to put together a program that makes sense. I can't say anything, but we even have the potential to get some serious funding to do this and do it well.
That's great. How about any other questions?
And I was just wondering what kind of gloves you use
Well, honestly, I use some rubbery, neoprene kind of gloves that are very flexible, and I got them at Home Depot.
Okay. I don't know if you use leather gloves or, the rubberized ones.
No, I try to use glove. And by the way, when you ask me a technical question, I'm not the super qualified trained guy, but what I find most comfortable is a glove that protects me from sharp edges, but also allows me to keep my dexterity in,
Gotcha.
in doing stuff. And guess what? When I'm up a tower, if I have to put a nut on a screw, I will remove the gloves.
Okay.
I can't do it with the gloves on.
Good enough. Thanks.
All right, very good. I think, Jim, we want to invite you. We do our W9DXCC in September. We're hoping that happens again this year. And the chairman asked that I reach out to you. There's usually around 200 people there. I think this year since in September and everything else has been canceled, we might get a little bit more popularity for our convention. So for this year. So we would like to invite you, see if we can get you to come out and present to us. And we can talk to you about more details on that later. But a different audience, a lot of different clubs are involved in participating in that. So it'd be really great if you
That would be fabulous. I'd love to look at doing that. I hope we're all traveling freely by then. Thank you.
Right.
I was there, by the way, 2 years ago, I was there. So I had a chance to meet everybody and I loved it. It's a great event.
Yes, and we've got a different venue and it's going to be very, very nice, I think, this year, if we can get it to happen. So great. I just want to thank everybody for coming in and being part of it. We're going to try and do, for our May meeting, we're going to have to do this again. The Schaumburg Library has canceled our reservation, and so we're going to need to continue to have online meetings at least for May, and we'll see how it goes after that. And W9XA is going to present the ARRL update, and that gets a little bit more interesting all the time. I just heard of one director that's resigned after this last board meeting, and I'm not sure what that means. And so be really interesting subject to have interactive with Kermit on our next meeting on May 8th, I believe. So with nothing else, Jim, anything you want to close with?
No, thank you all for staying on. I see 41 participants still here, which is fabulous.
What else do we have to do, Jim?
Oh, all right, that was it.
Wonderful job.
Yeah, that was
Good job. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
That was excellent, Jim.
Appreciate it, Eric.
Thank you.
Very
Mike,
good.
That was great.
Mike, I've got, I can make an announcement here for the general good of the membership. A couple of years back, when I was getting ready to do some more work on my antenna tower, I purchased one of the tower books from ARL. I cannot tell you exactly which one it was right now. It's in my library downstairs. That is going to be, anyone who would like to borrow that and go through it, I'll be glad to loan it out like a library book. It's a wealth of information, and because of the topic, it was an extremely interesting read from cover to cover for me. So anyone who would, who's contemplating work or just wants to refresh, I will come up with the title and have that available, which one it is that I have, and I'd be glad to pass it around. The knowledge needs to be out there.
Why don't you put that on the reflector, Ed, so people know what it is.
Okay.
Is that the Don Dezo book? K4ZA's book?
It might be. It's already been a couple of years since I read it. And I mean, I sat down and I was almost ready to go through it in one sitting. It was just one page. It's a page turner.
Okay, cool. That's good.
All right, very good. Thank you, everybody. 7-3 all around. It's great to see your faces, most of you.
Most of you.
Great.
No, I didn't see everybody because
What a way to single me out, Mike.
Don't look so serious, PPY.
What were you, Craig, what were you showing us? Were you showing us something?
Well, this is for the Bureau. So the Bureau is probably shut.
Oh.
What, the outgoing bureau?
No, W9 Bureau. Our W9 Bureau. This is sent to me from, this is VP6R cards for W9s that ask for a card through the Bureau.
Oh, wonderful.
I know. I knew you were looking for something. But...
Oh, yeah, there you go. Good. Good. Nice to see you, Craig.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Thanks for joining us. All right, everybody, we're going to close the meeting. Thank you so much. 7-3.
Good seeing everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Mike, hang around for 1 second.
I
after,
will.
okay?
I'll stick around, Jim.